Hey, I'm Ethan Becker, and I did my history project on the jet age. I'll start with the transition from prop to jet. After World War II, propeller-driven airplanes had reached their maximum efficiency and speeds, and there were new forms of propulsion that were sought after to achieve greater heights and speeds. So planes needed to fly faster to avoid the enemy radar, which changed the game by the end of World War II, which the British and the Germans did utilize, but no one else did. And then later, the whole world was having access to radar. And the United States had their first successful jet fighter, which was the Lockheed P-80 on the bottom left there. And then another very useful and impactful jet was the B-45 Tornado, which was really useful in the Korean War, which was one of the proxy wars for the Cold War. And it was the first multi-engine jet to be refueled mid-air. During this time, radar was improved so that pilots didn't have to see incoming aircraft with their eyes. They could see it beforehand. And this also forced pilots and developers to find a way to avoid detection. So planes had to start flying higher and higher, which allowed them to travel faster and faster. And this led to the development of the jet engine for speeds up to Mach 3, which is still about as fast as we can go today with jets. There are other ways with rockets, but with jets, Mach 3 is just about where we stop. And another way to avoid detection was through stealth aircraft. Um, and the first stealth aircraft that was invented was the F-117. We did have other planes that were mostly stealth, but they weren't centered around purely being invisible. But later we would purely just want invisible planes. And during the Cold War helped push the aviation industry to new places with the jet engine, radar, vertical takeoff, and supersonic. The Soviet Union eventually spotted the U-2 on radar, which the U-2 was thought to be invisible because of how fast and high it flew at 70,000 feet, which was higher than anyone else could go. But ultimately, the Soviet Union would shoot down a U-2, which would lead to needing to create even faster and even crazier planes like the SR-71, which is at the top right here, which can go Mach 3.3. And that was developed all the way back in 1964. And it's still one of the fastest planes today, powered by jets. And another thing we needed to be able to do was carry nuclear weapons to all the way to Russia or the Soviet Union. So that led to the invention of the Boeing B-52, which was this big jet in the bottom left. And it's really big and it could fly for a really long time and take jets just about anywhere. And it was actually so well designed that we still use the B-52 today. And they plan to continue to use the B-52 all the way through like the 2050s and have this plane actually last at least 100 years, which is pretty intense. And the Cold War naval aviation side of it, aircraft carriers were a crucial part of aviation because we wanted to be able to spread power wherever we needed to. And the United States had the most aircraft carriers. And the one I showed at the top right here, it's not directly about airplanes, but it's pretty crazy. It's this nuclear powered aircraft carrier that's 1,100 feet long and 93,000 tons. And it could travel 1,000,000 miles over the ocean before refueling. And we used it for so many decades. And then it was finally retired in 2012. And the plane that we would take off most commonly from these aircraft carriers was the McDonnell Douglas F-4, which is still today the most produced supersonic jet in history. And we used that until the 1970s, and we ended up replacing that with the F-14 Tomcat in the bottom right, which everyone knows and loves, mostly because of Top Gun. And aside from military advancements, the military advancements would bleed over into civil aircraft and travel. Air travel, which it's common practice today, but inventions like the localized radar and supersonic flight would eventually make its way to everyday people. Boeing's up and coming passenger jet, like the 707 at the top there, and also the 737, which I didn't put a picture of, were also fitted with localized radar to improve air travel safety. And supersonic flight ultimately did become a reality as well, with France and England producing the Concorde, which showed air travel glamorously and fast. And then we ended up retiring the Concorde at the turn of the century. And during this booming economy, air travel became cheaper and available to more of the population after World War II. And more people flew than ever before. And for the first time ever, air travel became more popular than train travel. And that was in the 50s. And aircraft pilots would frequently come home from war and then become commercial pilots. And these pilots also had a lot of insight into aviation, and they would bring that insight to the commercial side, which helped change the business in a positive way. And in conclusion, in just 100 years, we saw the birth of the airplane, and extreme advancements happen really quickly. And previously impossible feats were accomplished, like taking off from aircraft carriers, vertical takeoff, breaking the sound barrier, and even just making air travel affordable to the majority of us were possible. And perhaps one of the greatest engineering accomplishments of mankind is the invention of the airplane. And especially during the 1950s and the 70s, through the 50s and the 70s, we saw crazy fast advancements happening with jets, radar, you name it. And today we still see that technology improving our lives. And in fact, some of those planes even are still around today and are just as reliable as ever. And these are my sources. Thank you.